What is up, grinders? Welcome to the UFC 305. Punch time before lock here. A little bit early, but listen, we've got time to build lineups. The contests are slowly filling out there. John, going to be a good card, top to bottom. A tricky card. I think your decision making is going to be kind of a little bit all over the place for lineups, right? Start with the main event. There's the perhaps biggest favorite in UFC history, and there is a value that we have not had in a long, long time, man. And Macy Chiasson. This is a fun slate, and I think it's easy to get different. It's a little bit scary if you start feeding some of the 50% owned fighters, though.
Yeah, I don't want to like overstate it or oversell it, but I think it's the most complex UFC DFS like structure I can remember. Because you have one of the biggest favorites in UFC history. But I don't think Talbot's going to get there. I think that the line's moving away from him ever so slightly from a minus 2,000. Now he's more in the like minus 1,600 range when I like looked this morning. Minus 1,700, minus 1,600. So I don't think he's going to get there. I don't think it's Bo Nickel he would be trying to beat. But still, he's priced at 9,800. That is the most expensive a fighter has been on DraftKings, at least that I can remember. So that creates a very interesting variable, and the rest of the card shapes up in an interesting way as well, where it's actually pretty tempting to still go with Talbot, even though he's 9,800. Like, you can make some pretty decent lineups. And a lot of that is, I think, probably down to what you mentioned, where we've got a really good value play in Macy Chiasson, who has about a 50-50 shot of winning her fight, but she's priced down at 7,400. It's one of the more dramatic line movements we've seen over the course of a week since pricing was set. So it all wraps into like a really interesting pay-per-view card.
Yeah, I think, that's the big thing is like, I think you look towards the Macy Chiasson fight as like the first key thing for your lineups, because obviously the line value is there. I just can't believe that we're backing her. Like, I got to be honest and start it off with it, because it's like, this is a lady who was got knocked out when her opponent was on her back. That's not good. Like, long term, I don't want to be up kicked and get knocked out. Like, she's very soft to the body. Bueno Silva, a little bit wild in her fights. It's not like I can say with confidence play Mayra Bueno Silva as leverage at low ownership, because she's 8,800 on this slate. I think this is a spot where in GPPs, I'm going to be taking a few lineups without even any of this fight, and just praying it's a 3-round whatever fest that Bueno Silva wins like a close decision or something, because I understand Chiasson's a cash play, right? Like, we know that because of the metrics. She's got grappling upside too, John.
Yeah. No, I do. I think that's a totally reasonable take, that you just maybe avoid this fight in tournaments. I'm glad the line movement has kind of stopped. And it's actually going a little bit now. Like, Bueno Silva's now a 51%, 52% favorite. And if it had kept going, I was going to say, like, somebody's got to check, Bueno Silva's betting Discord server or something, see what's going on, because that was some really dramatic line movement. So I'm glad to see it. It seems to have halted. It still just leaves the fight as a coin flip. And I'm glad both fighters made weight. Sometimes there's dramatic line movement. One of the fighters clearly, not going to make weight. But yeah, so I do think,
why is this so high up on the card? That's my thing. I mean, it's the main card. It's the second fight on the main card. Friggin' Ian Gary is below this fight. Like, I really don't know stylistically why they put it on the main card. It could be a boring fight. Like, if it stays on the feet, even if they get takedowns, there's a world where Bueno Silva reverses her and gets top position and locks her down for a few. Like, I don't even see a lot of action in that fight. And it's really on Chiasson, though, to get those takedowns, because it seems like Bueno Silva's whole is the takedown game. So obviously Chiasson's ceiling is pretty high.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a tough fight, because it could score well, but it's probably going to be massively overrun. And it was difficult for me writing up the takedowns, right? I always like to write up 4 underdogs, and I had to put her on there, but I think I'm going to be under the field on her. But she might be my highest rostered underdog, but I still might be under the field. And our sims, actually, this is what, like, sims are good for. I think our sims have her at about a 35% chance of landing on the winning lineup. And that seems about right. But I think her ownership is going to be higher than that. I think her ownership is going to be maybe 45%, probably higher in the higher dollar stuff, like the 555, which can no longer get into because it sold out this morning. But yeah, I think
Single
Chase
entry
Son's
stuff.
going to see really high ownership, and I'll probably be under the field, but still have a lot of her.
Yeah, I mean, on this slate, if she wasn't on here, I mean, then I would think less. I think she's directly correlated with Talbot. You nailed that side of things. And I don't think people are thinking that way. It's like she allows you to get right to Talbot comfortably, grab maybe some of that mid range, maybe get another like just under 9K fighter in your lineups. And I also think this upper echelon, while we're talking about Talbot, Rhea Saruya is actually like the best spot like to be at this price tag. He's a aggressive wrestler. Like he'll go for the takedowns, the control time, a little bit of pitter patter, I'd imagine. And it's like 9,300 isn't the best, like worst price tag. Like he's not 9,800. We just never had this dynamic where he is still 200 more than Boudet, but nobody wants to go to Boudet. That's how tricky the slate is above the 9Ks.
Yeah, so I think Soraya is in a better spot, I think, than Talbot. I mean, that $500 of savings is significant, and Soraya probably scores better in a win, potentially. I think it'll be close. I don't think it's like a runaway thing. Like, oh, he's making his UFC debut. We have limited information, but he should get some takedowns. That's going to score some points. It's going to score some control time. His first round finish odds are about the same as Talbot's. So you're not really getting an edge on Talbot there. So I think Soroya, I think he's going to end up with higher ownership than Talbot. But I think it'll be close. And I don't feel that confident in that. But I kind of like Carlos Hernandez as well. This card for me is a lot about having certain fights that I want to target. And one of them is the Soroya Carlos Hernandez side, because I think Hernandez could upset the apple cart here. He could get the upset. We've seen debuting fighters do a lot worse than we thought they would. And then come back in their next fights and do, kind of live up to expectations a little bit more. I think we saw that like Zacharias. I think he got, beat in his debut, was a massive favorite, then came out, just had a really good fight in his next fight after that.
Well, it's on the feet.
Yeah.
Carlos Hernandez definitely has the ability on the feet to keep this thing very, very competitive. And he's been taken down at least once in almost every single one of his fights if he's not getting finished. So, there's a recipe here for Rhea to score 135 points, and that's over 3 rounds or like a first round deep finish.
Yeah, if Soroya gets like those chain takedowns, he could put up a massive score. So I think it's likely. I think I tagged him. I usually like to tag one favorite. I think he's the favorite that I tagged just because I think he's got a good shot at having the highest score on the slate.
Even with the ownership too, it makes more sense because of that extra, 500 that's Talbot's above him. Let's talk about another guy right in that range. I think I tagged him. You'll see that right on the screen. Joe Pfeiffer. This is a bounce back spot, right? We talk about potential spots where, hey, here's an older guy long in the tooth and Barrio. Barrio has been sparked in the first round. Now, it's a fun fight because it's like Barrio tends to do better down the stretch, has a gas tank, is nicknamed the power bar. I like this fight in a finish. I friggin' hate it in a decision. So I know what I'm signing up for, but I also think that Pfeiffer has just been proven to be a first, 7.5 minute finisher. After that, we don't know what we're going to get, but at least you got a round and a half of potential fireworks. Maybe he did wrestle. What was the one he wrestled? Oh my God, Al Hassan. Remember that? So he's got more tools than people think.
Yeah, and he I think had 6 takedown attempts against Jack Hermanson, just didn't land them.
Control time. If you're going for takedowns, you're getting control time.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think Pfeiffer is definitely a good play, and it's actually significant. If you think about now, we're kind of skipping over Martin Boudet, right? But if you think about Talbot to Soroya, there's a $500 difference, and there's probably not that big of a difference. Even just between Soroya and Pfeiffer, there's a $300 difference, and there may not be that big of a difference between Soroya and Pfeiffer at the end of the night. Going in, I do like Soroya for the takedowns. That's going to be his primary game plan. Pfeiffer can maybe mix it in, but if Pfeiffer gets the early finish, it's not going to matter. He's not going to need any takedowns or control time or anything, right? If he gets a win within 60 seconds, it's not going to matter. I'm seeing him with a better than 25% chance of getting that first round finish. And Marc-Andre, Barrio is not a guy that's going to, be running around the cage or whatever, right? He's going to be in there mixing it up. So yeah, so I think there'll be volume. What I get a little bit concerned about with this fight is that it's one of those fights where the guys are going to be like massive, and you're going to be like clenched your entire time. Like any punch could end the fight, but they're not necessarily like they're throwing too powerfully, right? The strikes are too powerful. You don't get like an extra point for an extra significant strike. You just get like the what 0.4 or whatever. So this could be one where it's like, man, those are like 75 high impact strikes. But one of the female fighters puts up 120 strikes that are just counted as significant. But if one of those 75 strikes ends up being a really powerful one that ends up in a knockdown, and then a knockout, that's obviously really significant. So yeah, I think Piper is like a little bit higher risk than Soroya, but I think his ceiling is almost as high.
I mean, they've still yet to put Pfeiffer against a pure grappler. I mean, Mearshart, we know, is that pure grappler, but he had no chin. So I don't even really necessarily rate that one all that high. But it's like, all right, here you go. Here's another banger in Barrio. Yeah, I like that fight just to get off of that upper echelon. You talked about the glaring, low-owned, sloppy heavyweight fight, Martin Buday and Arlovsky. Now you're sighing already. I sighed when I saw this fight because Arlovsky is the king of split decisions. And on this slate, now that we have that Chiasan value, I think it's even more so less valuable for Arlovsky, to be fair, because at 7,100, this guy could get you 53 points. I don't think this is the slate that you're okay with that happening. Would you agree? Like, and on the other side of things, what if Buday gets a first round finish? Like, what if Arlovsky's shot? I don't know about a second round. I don't think a second round gets him there, though. That's the problem. Like, it would be 2 knockdowns, and I think that's a low percentage. I think he gets knocked down once, and he's probably going to be night-night.
Yeah, I think this is the rare fight like this that's like it's an unpopular fight. And usually in these unpopular fights, like I prefer to go with the underdog. So it's like, well, Arlovsky's only 7,100. Any kind of win maybe gets him there. This one I'm actually a little bit more interested in Buday because I think Arlovsky could put up just a super low score. And he could put up the kind of win where if it's that kind of fight where he puts up 55 points and he's getting outscored by some of the losing fighters potentially. I think Buday actually have a little bit of interest in. I put it as the fight I'm least likely to go to. Wavering on that a little bit. Just because I could see myself getting more Martin Buday. There's the possibility he goes for a takedown here, right? Like if he lands a takedown, he could be getting, maybe some control time, 4 minutes of control time, and then a first round finish. Like that could be a significant score. And I think everyone's just thinking of it, as a big sloppy heavyweight fight. I think Buday's got about a 20% chance, between 15 and 20% chance of getting a first round win. I think you've got to roster him at least at that rate. He does make for an interesting, like pretty contrarian play that where people will think, oh, you'd have to be an idiot to play him, but then he goes out and puts up 105 points. It's like, well, I guess he got there. Yeah, so he's somebody I have some interest in. But it does have the potential to be just a huge bust.
Arlovsky's 45 years old. Heavyweight, of course, they can fight longer, but that's a long, like near 60 fight veteran of the sport. So, yeah, definitely durability wise, you hope that Buday has it. It's just, I still somewhat look at it as like a first, or I guess for Arlovsky's sake, a second round. I don't necessarily think he's turning back the clock. Like it's 10 plus years he's ever had a finish. But there's that type of context to fight, which it's like Arlovsky's the split decision guy, right? And then we have a guy who's been stealing split decisions left and right. You know who it is. It's Cub Swanson. This guy, he's getting that veteran rub in some of his fights. And this is a really fun fight that I think if I'm going, 150 lineups, I'm going to have exposure to it at a higher rate because of the volatility and the outcomes that could happen here. Feely just got knocked out. And I mean, are we just going to ignore that fact? His durability in the past, I mean, Brito knocked him out. We've had situations where he is looking good until his lights are shut off. And Cub Swanson still has the hands, probably lesser power than he used to, but power's the last thing to go. Why not Cub? And then the other thing is he's got win equity, like I said, because those split decisions. I tagged Feely. I think Cub also, obviously, longer in the tooth, has the chin issues. But from a pure action standpoint, these two are the more than likely, because is there a bigger bonus? I think did you see that on Twitter and X? I think this is the fight that's more likely gets that extra kick and bump for fantasy relevance because of that, because they're going to bite down and say, give me that $100 million or whatever the heck the bonus is.
Yeah. And I think I think there might be more of them too. I think multiple bonuses. So I think I think this is a good fight to go to. It didn't like Cub Swanson didn't quite get there for me as like a takedown, but I am interested in Feely somewhat. But it's tough. It's tough card to make decisions on. But I do think like Swanson is absolutely a viable underdog. And yeah, he's got about a 10% chance of a first round finish. So I think you need to roster him at least at that rate. But like he probably can get there even without a first round finish. So yeah, he's not super high paced. His last fight was about 74 points, decision win. But yeah, I mean, if he picks up the pace a little bit or gets an early finish, then he's definitely in play at 7,600.
I found it tricky because obviously I'm doing the core plays, you're doing the conviction. It's like I can't click Swanson as a core play because when you look at the metrics, you look at the money line equity, he's an actual value. Feely is to a certain degree on this slate, money line. It's just I don't look at him as like a super high ceiling outside of the first round. Like you'd have to have an all-out war, like one of Cubs like early days wars to really pay off. But there's targets around here that I really like, and I'm just gonna say it right away. Jillian Robertson. This girl is a fantasy goddess. She really is, sneakily. Doesn't have a ton of that pitter patter, but Liam brought it up on the Ground and Pound podcast that you'll have time to listen to before lock here. This girl's getting violent in there, man. She just like ground and pounded Viana out of there last time. Could we sneaky see her? Like, I'm not going to be surprised if she's the highest scorer on the whole slate. She has the ability to do it. Long in the tooth, when I say that all the time, Waterson Gomez, man, she has losses in a row, a bunch. If she stops the takedowns, you're going to go, uh-oh, this thing's competitive. But Robertson sticks to a game plan, good fight camp. Again, you can kind of see what they're doing, right? They got a decent – Robertson's never gotten over the hump, let's be honest. But against Waterson, she can make another name, check that off. The UFC is able to cut Waterson. They clear up room for the Contender Series, guys and gals. What do you think about Robertson? And, I mean – we've seen Robertson maybe not do good sometimes, and I just don't know how you get to Waterson, though, on this slate. That's the problem. It's like other slates, maybe I say there's a win equity, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's tough to get to Waterson just because like she's probably just going to get there with strikes. Looking at her past fights, I mean, she's got a takedown in her last 5 fights. I think all of them were losses. So, or no, I guess like a takedown each of her last 4, I think. But those were all losses. So, and it's just one, and we multiple attempts. I like Robertson a lot more. And I think Robertson's going to go under-owned because she's got, she's looking at her pricing. She's priced right above Andre Feely, who's got better win odds and better inside the distance odds, and above Alex Pereira, right? I think people are going to go there and get the extra $100, extra $200, and try to do something else with their lineups rather than going to Robertson. And I think that might be a mistake. If Robertson's wins score well. It's just the way the DraftKings scoring works, right? Like it's totally possible that Jillian Robertson gets like just squeaks out a decision win, and she gets a bunch of takedowns, right? A bunch of control time, some reverses, and maybe she gets a 3rd round submission, or maybe it goes to decision, and she puts up a really high score. And like Alex Pereira could have like a world famous like knockout of the year contender and score 80 points, and that's just the way the DraftKings scoring works. So and people aren't going to want to pay up for Robertson. So I think Robertson's a really interesting play. I think she's somebody I'm interested in being over the field.
And like I say, she historically was not a pitter patter girl that we always talk about that hidden scoring, but she's throwing more. She's actually getting violent in there. Dean Thomas has been in her corner forever, and he's like, go for it. Just don't be content with just riding out that top position, which means more of a ceiling for her. And like you mentioned, I was looking at Waterson being more aggressive for her takedowns. I don't even think if she wants to go for a takedown, she could get reversed and finished quick. Like the style that Robertson's bringing to the table. I like that take as well of the main event. So we might as well go right there. Why not? Right? Like it's right in the same range. Do you think that this card is more of the scrubs and stars than it is the middle range? Because I think when you're building middle range lineups, obviously you want a piece of the main event. It's a great fight to target. But I think this is one where the field is going to be so heavy on this fight. And you mentioned it. If this is a third, fourth, fifth decision, maybe a decision gets there. You and I know that like there's 200 strikes, phantom strikes lately. But I think this is going to be interesting if it's like a competitive striking affair, because I think it falls off a cliff for fantasy relevance. They're just going to sit there, 1-1. You know what I mean? It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's like very slower paced.
Yeah, like similar to the Piper fight, right? Like the Piper Andre Barrio one. Like these guys can throw hard punches. The problem is they may not throw a huge volume of them, and you can see that we've had the benefit of already seeing this fight play out. And Alex Pereira got the he got the second round win with the knockdown. I think he got there. Yeah, with the knockdown, he got like 97 points. But I don't know, like if you just take away that knockdown, suddenly it doesn't look so good, right? And like I've seen like the scoring on knockdowns be a very kind of variant over the last few cards, where it's like you're just asking like, how did the guy get on the ground if that wasn't a knockdown, right? So
what about pace? The pace of the fight, strictly from it's striking, no control time, and it's typically counters or 1-2s.
This could be a fight that is a big dud. The problem is the last few Alex Pereira fights have kind of been under the field saying, well, it could be a dud. The pace may not be there. And then he gets a first round knockout or a second round knockout. And that comes along, the knockout is coming with a knockdown that adds 10 points. And then suddenly, he's priced in the mid 8,000s and he's getting there. But I agree. I think it's a tough fight. I'm probably more interested in the Yuri side just because of they're a similar style. And I think the $7,700 price tag in a win would be easier to pay off than the $8,500 price tag. But I do think the ownership is going to go there with Yuri as well. But it's hard to know. Like we get a little bit of a different crowd playing for the pay-per-view events sometimes versus the fight nights. And so, yeah, I actually don't really have much conviction over who will be higher owned between Pereira and Yuri.
Yeah, that's the problem. It almost makes me and forces me to want to play Alex Pereira on this slate if Yuri's going to be the higher owned of the two guys, because you're getting that built-in leverage. It's terrifying, like I said. But who do you think scored more points in the first fight without the win condition? It's got to be Yuri, right? 25 points. He had the takedown. He had the same competitive nature of strikes and almost 4 minutes of control time. Like, he was scoring until he didn't.
So, yeah, I mean, if you take the 70 points away from Pereira and add them to Yuri, I think Yuri's still a little bit lower. I think because he got 25 and Pereira got 97 in his win. Okay. But the difference there is the knockdown, right? So if that goes the other way as well, then Yuri would be the higher scorer. So it's interesting. Yeah,
more tools.
Yeah,
he clearly has more tools.
Right. I do think I kind of side with Yuri in this one, but it's a scary. I think
it's a great
fight. Aim to be under the field on both of them, just figuring that and just hoping that it's a dud. Maybe you go way under the field on this one, and you just make ends in first round bet or something like that.
Hey, we almost would have had a 8,100 McGregor versus Chandler on this card, which would have been another wrinkle. Imagine if we had that also rare 8,100 fight. But we don't, so that's okay. We move on to the other fights that are right here. We have two fights at 8,400. Why did they price them the same? We never see this. Like, it doesn't happen. And I think this is actually another layer to the card. And I do think there's a world where there's some uniqueness in 50K lineups, 49.9, right? Because you have Diego Lopez and Delize both at 8,400, and then of course Ortega and Smith at 7,800. And you've got a lot of people taking their flag, sticking it in one of these plays. And when you have two at the same price point, I swear to God, I've been playing this game for so long. I always say it every time it happens. People don't like, when they hand build, don't like taking the same price point for some reason. So I think it's going to be interesting if you take, whatever combination. The obvious play, everyone's favorite toy, Diego Lopez. Guy's a wild man. The guy's got volume. The guy's got the ability to score over 3 rounds with volume, I think, and the crazy nature. But I mean, this is a hell of a step up. Ortega obviously took this fight, man, to just take the fight. I don't know why, because I feel like he was right there for a title shot again. And it's like, all right, man, here you go. Here's the number one prospect that everyone loves. Here's Diego. And then the Delete and Smith fight. Whew. John, this is ugly as ugly can be, because it's like Anthony Smith last time out gets us to the promised land with a first round finish. Neither of these guys were supposed to be in this spot. Delete comes in. This fight got canceled like a million times, and both of them were replacements. So I don't love the pace of that fight, but you can't argue that one of them in a first round finish is going to look really good.
Sorry, we're getting our TJ break in.
I heard the Lopez fight mentioned, and so I wanted to ask a strategy question, because it's kind of similar to what Squirrel was talking about with the main event. Maybe bet on a first round finish and then go underweight. This is sort of my thought process for something similar for Lopez. He's my highest owned fighter today. I got about 49% Lopez, and then I got him in cash. I got him in 3 for 3 of my 3-entry max. So I'm heavily overweight. And so what I went is I did a same game parlay style thing on Ortega over significant strikes to get the win over 1 knockdown. Is that something you would like? Not that you aren't necessarily are doing, but a similar thought process for this.
Well, the pivot.
Yeah, I'm getting more to the idea of like hedging UFC, because it's so easy, because it's all sequential, right? There's fight after fight after fight, and you can see where you are going into, like, say, the last fight of the night. Sorry, I missed so you're going over the field on Diego Lopez, and then you're betting over on Ortega props?
Yeah, Ortega to win, Ortega at significant strikes, and Ortega over 0.5 knockdowns.
Well, but Ortega could. It's tough, because Ortega could get the takedowns. I think Ortega is actually favored for more takedowns than Lopez. The problem is Lopez is more of a submission specialist. So like it might not be that great of an idea for Ortega to get the fight to the mat. But yeah, we got to see. I think it's interesting. The interesting thing about betting UFC props, like if you bet like over on significant strikes or over on takedowns or something, like what if he just gets 1 takedown and ends the fight, right? And then you could end up winning the fight under the significant strikes than you expect. But yeah, I like that idea of like trying to figure out a hedge if you're going over the field on something like
in
that.
theory, then it might just be better to do a bigger bet on just Ortega to win, as opposed to mixing in those props in there.
Yeah, exactly. I'd probably do that. Like that's probably a more like a straighter hedge.
Okay, I like it.
We're only here to help you, TJ. That's what we're here to do. But we talk about Diego Lopez being that guy that's eating up the ownership. People love themselves some Brian Ortega. On the other side, I don't know if you like it after the weight change, but like I said, that same price point, Smith and Delite. This fight is interesting because I wanted to tag Delite. I don't have faith in him going out there and trying to murder Anthony Smith in the first. And Delite is super durable, John. Like that's why I think this fight probably isn't going to be all that important once it goes to a decision. But I know that the relevancy is still here in a finish upside.
It's tough, like you mentioned. So these fights are Lopez Ortega and Smith Delite, same exact price point. They're going to be very different style fights, but it's hard to distinguish for our purposes because if one of them gets an early finish versus the other, then that one's probably going to score better. Even though the Smith Delite one I think is much more likely to stay on the feet, it's still tough to figure out which one's going to score better. I probably like Ortega more than Anthony Smith. I might like Delite more than Lopez, but it's tough. Like,
what's funny?
What was that?
You know what's funny? Smith is the most potent first round finisher outside of obviously Lopez. Like if you're ranking first round guys, like Smith comes out hot in that first.
Yeah, and so it'll be uncomfortable, right? But I think he could slow down. He's unlikely to get rack up some takedowns. Unlikely to to rack up control time. But he's one of those fighters. If it's that mold of a striker where if he gets the early finish, it doesn't matter, right? Like if he gets a knockdown at a few punches right before the knockout or whatever, that's going to be a massive score, like we've seen. So, I probably like Delize to win. And Delize maybe has some grappling, possibilities, but it's tough. And I wrote up Ortega as a Scroll Patrol's takedown, but I like both sides of the fight. Like I'm definitely not going to be avoiding Lopez. My concern with Lopez, he's just about a year removed from being a massive underdog in his UFC debut. He's looked really good since then, but it could come crashing down at some point. Like maybe we're getting ahead of our skis a little bit. We'll see. Like it might just take one fight for him to not look so good.
Yeah.
But the line has moved in the favor of Lopez since Ortega missed weight, and Ortega's like body language on the scale was not fantastic. He looked just kind of gloomy.
Yeah, and the thing is, I feel like there's a world where Ortega win might not even get you to the 10x. To be fair, like there's a world where that happens. So like I can't just say I want Ortega as leverage against Lopez. That's the problem.
It's possible. I think the $7,800 price tag does because he'll probably get a takedown in a win, right? So I think he's got the ability to pay off that $7,800 price tag as long as he's getting the win. I mean, like I said, like two of his last three losses have been 54 DK points or more. And so if you're adding 30 something points to that, if those were wins, like that's still going to score decently well for 7,800.
3-round fights. We'll see. I'll dig that up, but it is what it is. Like Lopez obviously has that fight style that's very fantasy friendly. Roto Grinders Premium. Have you heard about it? There's never been a better time to sign up for Roto Grinders Premium with NBA, PGA, NHL, MMA, MLB, and WNBA. We've got an option for whatever level you're looking for. Get yourself a 6-month combo subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. That's a savings of $250 instead of buying all 6 individual months of combo premium. You can get yourself the first month of RG Premium for $40 off for a limited time. Those that want to test run, dip their toes into the water with a 3-day pass, $19.99. Check out the links in the description for more information. And TJ, you were talking about earlier prop markets. DK Pick 6. Did you know that we have a Firefox extension for you guys in case you missed it? RG Premium subscribers can now use the RG DraftKings Pick 6 browser extension on Firefox to have our premium props and pick'em projections overlaid onto the screen so you can pick those off and get the best values and make all the expert picks in one place. Download it on Firefox today. I finally dabbled with Pick 6 last week. And you know what one of my picks was? It was Shara's opponent there. Was it Tricoli? Tricoli under 27.5 or something like that. Fantasy points, John. I was like, this is a smash spot. I've got a minus 700 on the other side. Shara Bullet, go kill him. Like, I think it's going to take one shot. And then there's a takedown. And then there's control time. And I'm like, it's creeping up towards that 27 points. But he did end up, gassing out, which was good for me. But there's always going to be a little bit of an edge, when you're looking at some of those prop markets. And that tool for other sports, not particularly MMA. MMA is more of a, kind of subjective sport, especially for scoring purposes. It's a great tool to use.
Yeah, I had a pretty good prop week last week. Actually, I think I lost one of my significant strike prop bets on one strike. So as a losing fighter, and just got one strike in there at the very end. God dang it. They're like sitting there counting the strikes right as they tally up in the ESPN app. But yeah, the prop market is probably not that efficient at this point. This is something that the sports books are just coming out with. So I think it's a really interesting way to get involved, have some skin in the game, and pretty entertaining Saturday night. So definitely worth getting in there.
You've got a choice. You want my sneaky fight of the night? You want the best target of the night? You pick. What do you want to go to? The 2 fights, but
Yeah, there's a couple of fights we haven't mentioned yet that I'm
There's an
pretty
obvious
interested in.
one.
So yeah, we'll go with the sneaky fight of the night.
Sneaky fight of the night, Ian Gary versus Michael Venom Page. There's finish equity that people aren't going to want here. Like, this is the fight that's so low owned for what the ceiling is. But we both know, actually the whole world knows, that they're going to do this, right? They're going to go, ha, 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 I'm showboating. There's no significant strikes until there's a finish. But if there's one of the two fighters that has a ceiling performance, look at Ian Machado's logs. I'm passionate about this. I couldn't tag it because I'm terrified. But at 8,200, this guy could easily get 95 points and be optimal. And that's control time. So he's got more tools to win the fight. Venom Page is just like, I don't mean this disrespectful. He's enhancement talent, right? I mean, he could absolutely hurt and finish Machado, Gary, because we've seen that Chinese guy, I can't remember his name, I'll look it up in a second, that really hurt him. And then Machado knocked him out in the third round, if you remember that fight. It was like, uh-oh, Ian finally has a chink in the armor. He actually got hurt. And if you looked at that fight against Magny, he had like 5 knockdowns via leg kicks. If those actually end up being knockdowns, he breaks the slate at like single-digit ownership on that card. Sorry I'm so passionate, but I know what I'm signing up for. It's going to be this flashy, kickboxing bull crap.
I'm just concerned that Ian Gary is going to fight a smart fight that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a high-paced fight. And, so at the press conference, he was talking about how, I think I can wear him down and win, get a third round win. Like, he's going to wear down in the third round. Like, that might be a smart way to approach the fight. It just concerns me. It's not a smart way to put up a super high fantasy score. So that's like where my interest in Ian Gary's interests diverge. So you've got to make some choices somewhere. And any of these fights, it's a pay-per-view card, right? It's higher level than your average fight night. And so a lot of these fights are just one strike away from ending early. So this was a scary one. We've got to make some choices somewhere. So I'll probably going to have to be under the field on this fight, or at least have less of this fight than a lot of the other fights. But yeah, it is. I mean, anything's possible. Like, these are guys.
You're going underweight with it being 30 some odd percent, 35% owned as a whole. Like, the whole thing is like, we're not clawing for win equity, but we still need 6 winners. Like, there's a world. I'm not trying to talk you into it, but I'm like, of the two guys, Gary is the one that has the higher ceiling, guaranteed. Page doesn't go for takedowns. Page, this is weird. This is one of those cases where I think if he's doing his flashy power striking, maybe he hurts Machado and he's the one that has the more finishing equity. But like, if it hits the mat, it's easily Gary. Price is right. That's the big thing for me, right? Like, and it gets you off of these obvious builds in the mid range.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think it'll be low owned. I mean, it's true. Like, I'm probably not going to have a ton of Michael Page, but I'm really going to be that under the field because he's got about a 10% or so chance of getting a first round win, and he's only owned at about 12%. Well, I should probably have him at least 10%, right? If he's got a 10% chance of getting a first round win, he's only 8,000. So yeah, I probably will end up at around the field. It'll just be a little bit less than a lot of the other fights. And yeah, I agree. I think Gary's got more upside for scoring. All else being considered, if it's coming down to a decision, my guess is when it comes down to that decision, that Gary's going to have more fantasy points up to that point.
I talked that fight up just so I could lay up the other guy that I was thinking about in the spot. It's Gene Silva. And then we can cap this whole slate off with our favorite fight that we both tagged a guy on. All right, we can get out of here quick. I know we've been rattling on, but Gene Silva, this guy, he barks at his opponents. He's got heavy hands. Seemingly somewhat has some volume. He's going to have a guy in front of him that's going to want volume with Charles Jourdain. Charles Jourdain's super low owned. Obviously, Gene Silva like plus 200 inside the distance. My prototypical guy that has a better odds to win inside the distance than his opponent. Thoughts on this one? Because I feel like more than it just ends up being a 3-round competitive decision. I don't want this fight to be competitive if I'm playing it. That's the problem.
Yeah, so I'll say I like this fight a little bit better than the Gary Page fight, which is what it's priced right around. Jourdain has a couple of 90-point DK 90-point decision wins, and that's something I like to see. Just means because like doesn't have great odds to get a finish, but can he score well in a decision? And I think for Jourdain, the answer I think is yes. And I think John Silva is going to be somebody that's going out there and he's going to push a pace. And he's got one UFC fight under his belt, and it was a big, first round win. He was a massive favorite against Weston Wilson, but he missed weight. And since Silva missed weight, the line's been moving in favor of Jourdain. So I like Silva, like 33% is a pretty high ownership mark, and I may take some of that and try to get up to Jourdain. Like Jourdain should be higher owned than 15%. Silva should maybe be a little bit less owned than 33%, but I think it's a good fight to get to.
And then we talk about, I'd say, the best curtain jerker we've had in a long time. We talk about, when it's competitive and when these guys start moving up the food chain. Lock Dog, lockout of the year candidate last time. What's his hole in the game? Takedown defense. The guy got controlled against the late notice Sopai, right? 3 takedowns. But he gets a knockout, just has that power that continues through the fight. And it's a perfect matchup because now he's got Ricky Simon, who's been a fantasy darling of ours, to be fair. He's been a goat of just clinch control, rinse, repeat takedowns, that chain wrestling, right? Durability is an issue for him. Something's got to give in this fight. Like, if this thing busts, I'm going to be like, wow, because of the way that these two fight.
Exactly. So I think it's going to have a really good pace. I have a hard time seeing this fight busting. I called it on the show with Blunder yesterday that I think the fight most likely to get canceled because it's the fight I'm most likely to have somebody on either side in my lineups. I think it's a great fight to target. I think Oliveira probably, his path to victory is a big flashy knockout. But Ricky Simon could easily be getting out of there with like 4 or 5, 6 takedowns. And if he's getting the win, if he's getting the control time, then that could be a slate breaking score, right? Even in a 3-round decision. So I think it's a great fight to target. I've been going back and forth. I know people have been talking about maybe betting the under 2.5 rounds, but it's hard. So I think Simone could be getting, he could, if he's winning the fight, it could go 3 rounds and could be a high scoring 3 rounds for fantasy purposes. I think Oliveira is more likely to end the fight early. But then that would be a massive score for his like $7,300 price tag.
Yeah, and it's like you start with Chiasson and Oliveira, you can really do whatever the hell you want. I just think the more if I'm going to be building with Oliveira over Chiasson, just because it's like what, a half of the ownership.
Yeah, I think that's a good viable strategy because I think Oliveira has a pretty decent chance of getting a win. He's got about a 32% chance of getting a win. Jason maybe is at 48. I mean, that's a big difference, but like Oliveira could potentially be putting up a very high scoring win if he's getting the early finish. I think he's the only fighter priced below 7,700 with like greater than 10% chance of getting a first round finish. And so, yeah, I think you're saving $100 there off of Jason, so you're going to be getting a little bit more money to spend in the rest of your lineups. And you'll be killing off a lot of ownership if Jason loses and Oliveira wins.
Absolutely. We've nailed all the fights here. Final kind of takeaway before we get out of here, because it's one of those slates where the lineups can build themselves if you're going chalk, right? The Chiassons up to Saruya or Talbots, and then picking off some values in the middle range. It's just something crazy is going to happen. I don't know if I'm smelling it. You're smelling it. There's something's going to happen on this slate that you're like, wow, what happened?
Yeah. Hopefully it's not a fight getting canceled after lock. But
don't say that. Don't put the bad juju.
Sorry. Yeah. No, I think it should be a fun card. It's a really complex DFS slate. I think the first 2 decision points are like Talbot and Jason, and then you want to go from there. You maybe want to avoid, like I said, I think in the expert survey, you want to avoid highly owned combinations. And I think like Jason and Talbot could be a highly owned combination. But yeah, and I do like, there's like fights I want to target. And so I wrote up, a few fighters and the takedowns, but I like the other side just as well. I like Oliveira a lot at 7,300, but I like Ricky Simon as well. I like to put up a massive outlier score at 8,900.
Talk to me about the main event.
What was it?
Main event. Talk to me about the main event. Like, how are you handling it? Because I think it's it's high owned for this particular card where you can go all the way up to these guys that have like Reyes Soriano, who you just mentioned, has like 130 point upside. Literally, like he's got the skill and path of victory to do so. Pfeiffer's got early equity. There's ways to build.
I'll say that like comparing the main event to the fights around it, like it's too high owned. And so I don't want to necessarily fade it saying like, oh, these guys can't do anything. Like they're not going to go out there and like pillow fight, but like they might not score well for DFS. Like it might be one of those highlight knockdowns, like highlight knockouts. It just doesn't put up a massive DK score. And I could be wrong. It's just the ownership is there already, and I think that ownership is accurate. I think the fight's going to be about 80% owned. Like it probably doesn't have an 80% chance of landing on the winning.
Absolutely, TJ. Any thoughts? Or you just want to look good on here?
Yeah, no, I feel like I look pretty good today. You know, hair's popping a little, and so I wanted to come in. But no, a couple questions. One, just I'm gonna kind of guess the answer is no based on Squirrel's just analysis, but I like to always ask it. Can you double up in the main event today?
I might not even do it in cash.
Okay. Second question is cash related. Who would you say are 3 fighters that are just like the necessary cash game fighters today? Because I think we might have more people playing cash since it's a pay-per-view UFC 303.
I don't even know if there's 3. So I think the first is Jason. I think you want to get her in there. That's win equity you probably need. I think if I'm going main event, I like the Yuri side more than Alex Pereira.
You know why? It gets you up to multiple 9Ks if you want to go that route.
Yeah.
And then if you're prioritizing only one, for what it's worth, I do have a lineup in a cash setting that has Yuri and it has both of these guys. But would you prioritize Saruya or Talbot in a cash game setting?
I think assuming you can do something with the $500, I'd go Saruya. I think in a win, like let's assume both of them win, and that's the likely outcome. Both of them are going to win. It's a coin flip who scores more points. So I would say like take the $500, use Saruya, and improve something else in your lineup.
Mike, what about you?
It's tough. It's Saruya for the grappling upside. I just can't get behind a 9,800 in the style of fight. This guy Talbot has done nothing but second round finishes. There could be a feeling out process, bigger cage. There's more ability for him to fall off. And I got to give my take for cash wise. Andre Feely is the money line play. I'm not convinced by him even being, a high ceiling perhaps, but I think that he's a safer floor because of that money line equity.
All right. That makes sense. Good work, everybody. Good show. I'll let you close it out and I'll bounce myself out.
You got it. Yeah, we finally have a week off, John, after, so many cards in a row of lackluster. We have this great card dealt in front of us. I appreciate everybody tuning in. For John, Squirrel, TJ, myself, we're out of here.